Thunder, 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 Thundercats! Snarf! Hello, and welcome to Old Toy, New Joy, the show where I share with you my previously enjoyed toys I purchased from online sources, thrift stores, and collector shows that once belonged to someone else. Recently, I started to think about vintage 1980s toy lines I never had as a child, but that I might like to collect. And recently, I came across some Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle figures and featured them on the show. Similarly, I started to think about Thundercats. And I think I was aware of Thundercats as a child, but I don't remember ever seeing an episode of the very popular cartoon, which ran from 1985 to 1989. And I certainly never had any of the action figures, which were produced between the years of 1985 and 1987. And yes, from what I understand, the cartoon was very popular, and kids liked the figures, which were made by LJN, but the action figures were not distributed as widely as some of the other competing lines from the larger toy companies such as Mattel and Kenner. And as a result, Thundercats are pricier as a collectible nowadays than most other similar toy lines. The second wave is more rare than the first, and the third wave is extremely desirable. Today I have some figures which I recently purchased on eBay. I negotiated a good deal from one seller for this 1985 Lion-O with his Sword of Omens, and the sword itself can be worth the price of a figure. This Mum-Ra without his headdress, fortunately, and this young Tigra, and Monkeyan. These four figures are from 1985. I then purchased from a different seller this posable 1986 Snarf. And it's more interesting, larger, and uncommon than his 1985 counterpart. Along with Wily Cat and Wily Kit, the 1985 versions of these figures were only around 3 inches tall, and they were not posable. They were pretty much just like figurines. And then Wily Cat and Wily Kit were also released in 1986 as posable figures and are quite expensive. Also during this time, there was a 2.5-inch Thundercat figure line, but I can imagine a lot of disappointed children around Christmas time when their parents waited until the last minute to get Thundercats figures, which were on their child's wish list, and purchased them the 2.5-inch figures. They're not posable. They're kind of lame in comparison to these large figures, and exciting and colorful figures at that. And if you're not familiar with the premise of Thundercats, I'll give you a real quick little rundown here. The Thundercats were basically about a bunch of part cat, part human aliens who needed to flee their dying home planet of Thundera and arrived on the third Earth while fighting off the evil mutants. And they arrived at third Earth, and they sort of awoke a mummified Mum-Ra, who was an evil sorcerer, undead, nonetheless sort of summoned the evil spirits to take on his powerful form and try to destroy the Thunderians who had invaded his home planet of third Earth. And he wanted to regain control while the Thunderians were trying to rebuild a new Thunderia. So we'll take a quick look at each figure. Here's the largest of my figures, Mum-Ra. It's about 7 inches tall. I'm going to compare this figure to some of the other 1980s action figures of the time in a moment. The figures all had this trigger, and they also had this little input hole here where you could take a battery-operated device, put it through there, it would connect, and the eyes would light up. I don't have that device, but the trigger works, and there's sort of like the Superpowers figures, their arms move, but you don't have to do anything to the legs. You got the trigger instead. There we go. So there's Mum-Ra. Now, there were some really cool accessories that came with these figures, and with the exception of Lion-O's Sword of Omens, I don't have any of those accessories. They can be more expensive than the figures. But still, I'd rather have the figures than nothing at all. And here's a smaller figure, Monkeyin. He's the leader of the Monkeyins. He's an evil mutant. And along with Jackalman and Slythe, he chased the Thunderians to 3rd Earth. And his trigger moves his right arm. Can't remember, I think he had a club or something. And here's Tigra. In 1985, they came out with Young Tigra, and then his character matured and developed, and in 1986, they came out with Old Tigra. And here we go, trigger. I like his sort of aquamarine or teal coloring. I'm not sure what that is. These are very colorful figures, as I said before. I like them a lot. Very different from what else was going on at that time. And here's Snarf, and I was looking on eBay at the time that a seller posted Snarf. I mean, within the hour, I snatched him up because the seller was selling him for about a quarter of what everybody else was asking for the 1986 posable Snarfs, and I wasn't sure if it was a mistake or what. It was a buy it now price, and I was like, gee, I gotta jump on this because it's not gonna last. I certainly didn't want to pay what the going rate was, which is around $100. I was not going to pay that. So I was kind of starting to settle for maybe the 1985 statuette version of him, or even there's a pencil topper that was quite popular in 1985 that kids were purchasing in place of the figure. But I really wanted this 86 one. Very colorful figure. Tail moves, head, arms. I like it a lot. And here we have Lion-O, and this is the red hair version of Lion-O. There's also an orange hair version of Lion-O, but I like the red hair better. And again, you could put that device in his back and his eyes would light up. The sword, oh, it's funny, all the swords are kind of like bent like that. I'm not sure why. He also came with a red claw, which I don't have. That's okay. He does have the trigger, but someone's been using this a lot. It almost looks like he went to the doctor and said, "Doc, my elbow hurts when I move it like this." Well, don't move it like that. It barely wants to move. He's been played with quite a bit. Very exciting figure. So I can understand why. I love the coloring again. Good size. And just to give you an idea of the size of the Mum-Ra Thundercats figure, comparing him to other figures of the mid-80s and very early 90s, the kids were playing with at this time to show you just how big he was. I mean, we've got the 3 3/4 G.I. Joe here, Shipwreck, and we've got Michelangelo, which is just about 4 inches. Wonder Woman Superpowers, 4 inches. The T2 here from about 1990, which is, looks like he's about 5.5 inches. The He-Man figure of Clawful here, he's definitely over 5 inches. Mum-Ra was about 7. And then here's Rowdy Roddy Piper, LJN, also 8 inches, and I've got his homemade kilt that I put together myself because I didn't want to purchase the original. So anyways, I've got myself a nice little starter set of LJN vintage Thundercats action figures. Next figures I'd like to get are maybe first wave Chitara and Panthro, and maybe second wave Wily Cat and Wily Kit. But we'll see. Again, I don't see these things at thrift stores and rarely at collector shows, so it may be an eBay sort of project. If you like the video, please like the video, and we will keep them coming. In the meantime, I encourage you to visit other episodes of Old Toy New Joy. We talk about lots of cool stuff, such as He-Man, Transformers, G.I. Joe, wrestling figures, old baseball cards and hockey cards, comics, Hot Wheels, all kinds of cool stuff. Until next time, this is your Toy Whisperer saying farewell from Old Toy New Joy.